Hello and welcome to the Midnight Bible Study. Given that we live in basically a fallen world, in many ways an evil world, there is a trap set by the devil, and the risk is that it could cost us our soul. Basically, for a moral and good, decent person, they're actually they might feel a little comfort, like I'm a good person, and that's going to help me out in the on Judgment Day. The problem is that the being a good person actually can be a trap. In other words, the devil can use that. The devil is very wily and cagey, and he knows how to use that against you, and he knows how to use what you feel is your strength in order to use it as your downfall. That's the topic of today's report. The bitterness, the folly, and the pain. The bitterness, the folly, and the pain. That's a line from a poem by Vachel Lindsay. The bitterness, the folly, and the pain. I mean, we've all experienced that in life. We've been there. Let me to exemplify this trap that I'm talking about. I want to tell you real briefly, summarize a story called Timon of Athens. It's a play by William Shakespeare, and it tells the story of Timon of Athens, who was a wealthy person in Athens who was very generous. He was wealthy and he had lots of money and he had lots of friends, and he was very generous with his money. He would pay when his friends got into debt and his creditors were hounding them, he would pay their debts for them. He would actually provide money for them for dowries for their weddings. He would give when he had parties. He would send people home with rich gifts, wealth. And he was so generous with all his money. And his assistant said, Timon, you're overestimating these people. You're spending too much. These people aren't going to be there for you in the end. Well, Timon didn't. He was a giver, and he had the ultimate faith in people, and he kept on giving. Well, ultimately, he ran out of money eventually. And what happened when he ran out of money is he thought, well, you know what? I've been a giver my whole life. I've given all these people all my money. I've paid their dowries. I've paid off their creditors. I've given them rich gifts. I've thrown endless parties for these people. They'll help me out when I need them. So he goes around to all his friends, and each one of them has a different excuse for why they can't help him. They can't help him. So Timon of Athens invites them all over for one last party, big party. And he sits them all down at the table, and then in front of them is a bowl of warm water. That's it. And then he starts throwing the water in their faces. And they're shocked, and then he says, "Get out of here, you people are worthless," and he sends them all home. And then Timon basically is so disgusted with all these human nature, with people. He hates people at this point. He's so disgusted, he never wants to see people anymore. So he goes into the wilderness to live in a cave where he'll never have to see these two-faced, faithless, thankless people. And so he's living in this cave, and with nothing. He's broke, he's destitute, he has to dig for roots in order to eat. One day he's digging for roots and he uncovers gold. And he has no interest in it. I mean, big chunks of gold. He could care less. He just throws it back into the earth. It disgusts him. He just keeps a few pieces of gold around to throw at people if they come near his cave. And so that's the way things are going for a while. But word gets out that he has gold. And so all of a sudden, everybody wants to come and be his friend again. He has painters, writers, philosophers, statesmen. Everybody's coming to see Timon, and they want to be his best friend because they know he's got gold. And so he gives them gold. He gives them a handful of gold and says, get out of here. Get out here. Don't ever come back. Go back, rob each other, steal from each other, cut each other's throats, you lowlifes. So this is how Timon feels about people, based on the fact the way they treated him. They treated him like, they didn't when he needed them, they weren't there for him. So that's how Timon felt about it. He was bitter and hateful about people in general. See, this is the trap that the devil can set for the good person. The person who is good and has a good heart And yet this is a fallen world we live in. And so a person could, let's face it, as far as I know, everybody's going to get hurt at some point, one way or another, in this world. I don't know who can escape it. Everybody's going to get hurt. But the question is, are we going to become bitter like Timon in Athens and become hateful, even judgmental? And the problem is, of course, is let's take a look at Matthew 6:14. You see, well, actually, look at Luke 6:37. Do not judge not lest you be judged. See, that's the problem. Jesus says, judge not lest you be judged. So if we're judging people as being scoundrels, worthless, back-faced, two traitors, whatever, greedy, whatever. Maybe we're right, but the problem is we're judging people. And Jesus says, judge not lest you be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. So in other words, if we're unforgiving towards people who maybe justly hurt us and treated us like garbage, and we won't forgive them, guess what? We won't be forgiven. That's an eternal choice, eternity. That's an extremely unfortunate situation for a good person who's been hurt, is that they become nasty, bitter, and unforgiving. Forgive not. Forgive, and you will be forgiven, is what Jesus said. If you do not forgive others, then I will not forgive you, God says. So that's the trap. Good people who are, maybe self-righteous, maybe very, they have good cause for their hurt and their pain. The problem is that, let's face it, I don't know, even most good people, I would think, have probably hurt somebody too. Maybe they don't realize it, but they probably have. I myself don't have this problem of being so, I know I've hurt people in the past, and as a result, the idea of forgiving people makes sense to me, because there's probably people who I've hurt also. So I understand that people make mistakes, and we have to forgive. Perhaps there are some people who are just generally good people, and they haven't intentionally hurt anybody, or maybe they're not aware of how they've hurt people, even if they have hurt them, and but they've been, had some nasty thing happen, and it's really hard for them to get over this hump of forgiveness. But forgive others, and you can be forgiven. If you won't forgive others, God says, then I won't forgive you. So it's extremely important. The last words of Edith Cavell, the World War I nurse who treated soldiers from both sides and was ultimately court-martialed under German military law and sentenced to the firing squad. Her last words were, patriotism is not enough. See, politics is another case where we live in a fallen world, and we're constantly assaulted with, in this world we live in, we're faced with, if you watch the news, we're faced with shocking and evil things going on and called good. Shocking and evil things are called good on a daily basis by our leaders and our media and people in Hollywood and such. We're constantly offended by people like this, and especially in politics, where we're constantly betrayed by our so-called leaders and even insulted as we're betrayed. And it's easy to become bitter about politics, but the problem is the same. It's exactly the same kind of situation. You can become bitter about it, but you may want to think about just forgiving and praying for our leaders instead. In fact, the Bible says pray for our leaders, and maybe this is why. So, the last words of Edith Cavell: patriotism is not enough. I must have no hatred or bitterness towards anyone. This was her last words as she was dying. Patriotism is not enough. I must have no hatred or bitterness towards anyone. God bless you, and good night from the Midnight Bible Study.